Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode 17 of Be With Me in season 12. This is Romans chapter number 4. We're starting with verse number 1, and we've got to get to righteousness. That's our problem. All have sinned, all fall short of the glory of God. And we're going to look to a hero today. We're going to look to the Neil Armstrong of faith. That is the guy who made the first steps that were effective in getting towards righteousness. And Abraham is going to loom large today. He's going to be our Neil Armstrong. You remember Neil Armstrong, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Same idea with Abraham here, is he is going to be our spiritual Neil Armstrong. And how is that? We're going to look at his first steps, and those are of belief. And why is it significant? It is because the same steps, the same stuff that Neil Armstrong, Abraham did, are going to be effective for us here today. So here this is. Listen with me. This is Romans chapter 1, verse number 1. So holding up Abraham. What shall we say then was gained by Abraham, our forefather, according to the flesh? For if Abraham was justified by works, which of course is our temptation, he has something to boast about, but not before God. For what does the scripture say? Now, this is a quote from Genesis chapter 15. Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. Abraham believed God. Abraham's first steps were belief. Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. So we learned something both about Abraham, what he did, and what God did. God counted, and Abraham believed. All right, let me just skip down to verse number 11. The purpose was to make Abraham the father of all who believe without being uncircumcised, so that the righteousness would be counted to them as well, and to make him the father of the circumcised, who are not merely circumcised, but also walk in the footsteps of faith that our father Abraham had before he was circumcised. So the key concept here is that Abraham is an essential part of Paul's example. And why is that? Because he had faith, he had belief before he was given the sign of circumcision as this marker of Jewishness. And a critical element here is not the outside, but the inside. It's not the works, it's the belief. And it's so important for us, because we've just learned a lot in Romans chapter 3 is that all have sinned and all fall short of the glory of God. Now, the problem is we are trying to get to righteousness, and we learned that none of us have made it. And then we find out here's this guy, Abraham, way back when. And Abraham is a good example of something. And what is it? Faith and belief. So Abraham, he actually gets to righteousness. And we got to study this. Why? Because we got to learn how he did it so that we can do it too. So we have to learn about our first steps, guys. The guy who did it first. And God says here, it was effective. Verse 3 says, Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. God says, this worked. I count this as fixing this unrighteousness problem that we all have. So Abraham did something that started all of us on the right path. So he can be the father of us if we do the same thing that he did, that if we take the same steps as he did, specifically belief. So the cool thing about this passage is it reveals something about mankind and our quote-unquote work and our efforts. But the essential element, the other side of this, is what it reveals about God, that God counts a belief, that God counts faith, and it counts as righteousness. Without that, we'd be up a creek. So Abraham believes, and it is counted as righteousness. Now, remember what righteousness is. I think it's a good way to think about this, is perfection. It's this burning orb of holiness that allows us to begin a conversation with God. Chapter 3 talks all about, it's like you don't have it. You don't have righteousness. All have sinned. All fall short of the glory of God. None of us are perfect. None of us has this burning orb of holiness and righteousness. So we need some help. And we need help from God, first of all, which is he's got to count something as righteousness for us, and it is belief. So it's not precisely in our nature, all have sinned and all fall short, and it reveals something about humanity via Abraham. That is, if we have faith, if we have belief, if we have this inclination towards God, if we have this inclination towards this yes from God, then he is going to give us credit for it. Now, our problem is we want to change the definition of what God gives credit for. He says, I'm counting this way back when. We want to change the definition and say what counts for us is work, but God says right from the beginning, right from the get-go, right from your Neil Armstrong guy, he had this right. That is, what does God count? He counts belief, and it has always been belief. So let's go all the way back to early human history. So here's what I think this means for us. All right, number one, look in your pants. No matter what you find in there, Abraham can be your father if we have what was Abraham's essential element, which is belief, faith, and trust. So Abraham can be your father if I believe, if I have faith, if I trust. So let's remember an example what Abraham did. So let's use him as our Neil Armstrong. Let's use him as our first steps guy. Let's take those same steps and have it counted for us like it counted for him. And then let's stand in awe of God, that God counts this as belief. He counts not our actions, not our works, not our circumcision, not the stuff we do, but our belief. So as we look back into what our people were like, well, our people were like, our old people, our Abraham, our history guys, were believers. Abraham believed before he was circumcised. Abraham believed after he was circumcised. So we learned something about our people. Our people were believers. And then secondly, what is my God like? Well, he is a counter of belief. So we come from a people of believers. We have a God who is a counter. He credits belief. So therefore, the end result is I should believe. Thanks for listening.